Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Inoue versus Doheny fight. And so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Inoue is 27-0 with 24 KOs, and Doheny is 26-4 with 20 KOs. This fight is for the IBF, WBC, WBO and WBA World Super Bantamweight titles. Inoue's last fight was a win via TKO in round 6 versus Neri, and Doheny's last fight was a win via TKO in round 4 versus Biogos. And Inoue is 31 and Doheny is 37. This is in Inoue's home country of Japan. Doheny's losses have come versus Goodman in 2023, Conlon in 2021, Baluta in 2020, and Roman in 2019. And to speak more about what I've just been saying, of course, it's the return of the monster, and in my opinion, pound for pound number one, my favourite fighter currently going around. And after another realistically destructive performance past that first round against Neri, he's back, and obviously against an opponent in which not really many people are too keen about seeing him fight, because everybody's just expecting Inoue to walk through him. But at the same time, Doheny is of course unbeaten in Japan, and he's a former world champion, and he's arguably not past his best. I mean, he is coming off a stoppage victory, and of course, like I mentioned, in his career, he's had some big upsetting wins, and he knows how to be an underdog and knows how to win being an underdog. So, like I say, it's going to be a tough test still for Inoue. Of course, everybody was expecting the Akhmadaliev fight, or in my opinion, I was expecting the Goodman fight, or even the Casemiro fight. But so there was definitely names around that super bantamweight division in which people was expecting. But at the same time, I think Inoue was just wanting to fight in September. Doheny was the easiest fight to make. He was there ready waiting, and possibly there was other little contractual issues that made the other fights a bit harder to make. So of course we've got this one now, and it's going to be interesting to see after this fight what actually happens with Inoue, because of course his excellency around in the sport and doing what he's doing. He seems very keen to bring over Inoue into maybe Saudi, maybe the UK, and maybe America, have a big fight with him there. So it will be intriguing to see what happens after this. But of course, like I said, he can't overlook this fight, and he definitely has to be fully focused, because of course what happened in that last fight versus Neri, where in that first round, of course, he got dropped. I'm going to speak a bit more about the effect of that in just a moment. But you know, he got dropped, and it's shown that you can hurt him. He's not invincible, and now that perhaps gives confidence to other fighters that are going in against him. And Doheny is somebody who I believe is coming into this fight confident in his own ability. Like I've mentioned, that unbeaten ability in Japan, and on a good fight win streak. And obviously he has lost, and that Goodman loss was recently quite a bad loss for him. And you know, he has suffered bad defeats in his time, but he's always been able to rebuild and come back to a high level, and he only realistically has lost to some of the best guys whilst they are at some of the best points in their careers. And so I think it's still going to take a lot for Inoue to win this fight, and obviously everything is in his favour, and I suppose that means all the pressure is of course on him, but he does typically thrive under the pressure, and Inoue is the biggest fighter coming out of Japan at the moment. And you know, he's kind of starting this whole kind of line of just big names, big fighters coming out of Japan. And now when you look around the lower weight divisions, Japan is currently dominating, and you have to give a bit of credit to that of Inoue for just putting Japan on the map boxing wise. And yeah, it's really impressive what Japan are doing. And of course this card is going to be another entertaining card, and I want to speak about this card because, like I mentioned, Japan at the moment is flying in boxing. And I mean, October 13th, October 14th, they had that 2-day top rank back-to-back shows with 7 world title fights in 2 days, which is incredible. So there are big names about, and also big names on this undercard as well, including also being on this card Barroso versus Harioka for the WBA Interim World Super Lightweight title, in which I think Hirioka will win via TKO in round 6. I think this is going to be an interesting fight. I think when you possibly look at it as a matchup, it's a good matchup. It was a fight which hasn't really been talked about too much, and Perhaps I'm a little bit surprised that that's the case because Barroso, coming after the first round win versus O'Hara Davis, he made a bit more. He made a statement with that, and there was names being float around, and we weren't really too sure who he'd end up fighting next. But of course, this fight's come along, and perhaps it's not really what everybody expected, but it's going to be a step up in opponent for Harioka, and Barroso is used to going and travelling to other countries to get in fights and having to deal with that kind of atmosphere. But at the same time, I like Harioka as a fighter, and I think he's destructive with the power. I think he's got very good counters, and perhaps Barroso is slowing down a little bit. With that last performance, it looked like he was trying to counter more. It looked like he was not really trying to be the front foot aggressive self in which we've typically seen from him, which has gotten him a lot of the success that he's had. But obviously, it worked versus Davis, but I just don't see it working versus Harioka. I think if you can get past the first couple rounds with Barroso, then you can go on to win. And obviously, he has been stopped quite badly a few times. And so, like I say, I believe Harioka, with the power in which he possesses as well, will be able to get that stoppage win. And also on this card is Takai versus Higa for the WBO World Bantamweight title, in which I think Higa will win via TKO in round 9. Bit of a maybe bold prediction to say for that one, but in my opinion, I think Takai, he's not a bad fighter. I think if he's against defensive minded fighters and against counterers, he can do well and he can have success. I think attacking minded, he is a good fighter and picks his shots nicely. But in that Maloney fight last time out, into the later rounds, it looked like he was really struggling and really didn't have too much left. And obviously, he deserved to win, and all credit to him for giving his all and really pushing. But I think Higer is going to come with a higher output than that of Goodman and is going to be able to push the tempo more than that of Goodman. And that's when I think Takai is just going to struggle into these later rounds. And that's where I think, like I say, TKO around 9, Higer, bit of a bold prediction. But I just can't see Takai with the style in which he has, which is type of like a slick type style, will be able to keep Higer off him for the entire fight and will be able to kind of stop him because he has that confident kind of low guard and weak defensive type style. To go back to the main event though, of course Inoue, I mean he's a world class fighter, like I've mentioned, in my opinion, pound for pound number 1. You can kind of put him anywhere in the top 3 and I wouldn't really dispute it because of just how good the top 3 of the pound for pound is at the moment and just how lucky we are as fans to be able to watch 3 of the best fighters go on and fight relatively regularly at this point. And yeah, it's just amazing to see. Of course, Crawford is coming off a little bit of a not amazingly good performance last time out against Madrimov, but Usyk currently flying high after the win versus Fury, and Inoue is coming off a, in my opinion, still very good performance versus Neri, and so there's always going to be criticisms when you're at that high point. I mean, people are criticising the level of opponents in which Inoue have fought, and I mean, people are criticising Crawford's last performance, and so, like I say, if you're at that high level, you're going to get criticised, but at the same time, it's just amazing to see these fighters fighting relatively regularly as well. And obviously, to speak about him as a fighter, I'm going to list quite a lot of things, but there are so many things you can list. No fight is perfect, but there is a lot of things in which Inoue does exceptionally well, and I know I'm going to miss certain things. But of course, to mention first, the speed in which he has and the sharp kind of style in which he possesses is just often too much for a lot of fighters. And in general, the speed, the explosiveness, the power, all mixed in, makes it very, very difficult for any opponent. He's got great counters. He's explosive, like I mentioned. He's difficult to time with his quite difficult, awkward movements a lot of the time. Obviously, Neri did time him with a very good shot, and I'm going to speak a bit more about that in just a moment, but he typically is quite difficult to time, I believe. He works angles very well, finds openings exceptionally. He has great shot variation. He goes to the body beautifully, picks his work really nicely. He's very accurate as well. He has an in and out type style a lot of the time, but also he can vary that up. He can fight in and out type style. He can kind of cover up and take shots and then respond back with combinations of his own. He has multiple different ways, multiple different varieties, styles, game plans, and that's just credit also down to his team as well. He's powerful, he can fight on the front or the back foot, he's accurate, like I mentioned, his athleticism is excellent. He typically fights at a fast pace and will control the pace of the fight a lot of the time because fighters are wary of, Inoue, because even when you get confident against Inoue, like Neri did, he can shut you down. He shut Neri down very, very well. He has good attacking variation, like I mentioned. He has a high IQ, great movement. He's very good at being just out of range. Of course, now he's faced adversity, but he came back from that adversity really, really well. And like I say, really shut down Neri very, very fast and learned from that mistake, made the necessary adjustments, and then just went back to frustrating Neri as an opponent because Neri, I think it was always going to be seen if he was going to be able to get frustrated or not, and it seemed like I thought he was because Inoue a lot of the time, like I say, is really difficult to time and really difficult to deal with, and he was just too much for Neri, and that's when he can also mentally break you down as well, Inoue. And Doheny, I don't necessarily know if he will get frustrated against Inoue because of the mindset I believe he often comes into fights with, not being quite so, I suppose, aggressive or pent up and things like that. So I don't think mentally he could get broken down, but we'll have to see. Of course, his experience might come into play, Doheny's experience at such a high level. Negatives about Inoue, I mean, that low guard and the fact he can drop that guard was the reason why he got knocked down in the first place. It was a bit of a fundamental just issue in which he, had to deal with, and it wasn't great to see that when it was coming off an exchange, he just dropped his hands because he was trying to be confident and just throw hooks because that's when you can get caught. And if he does that again, then he probably will get caught again. And so it's something that I believe he definitely will have to work on. I think sometimes he can seem a little bit off balance, especially, like I say, coming off of physical exchanges. I don't think he's the most physical. I think Doheny might have that physicality over him. He of course, might be overconfident. I mean, you see him taunting and things like that during fights, and it's obviously entertaining and brings more eyes towards him. In which, like I say, he's done really well for Japan, but perhaps it is overconfidence. And when you are against somebody like Doheny, who has a lot of power in his shots, you don't really want to be too overconfident against him. He can sometimes overcommit on shots on the inside. He can take a few rounds to work out an opponent, and possibly in them few rounds, if Doheny comes on really quickly and comes on really strong, then he could win maybe an early round or two. And he can also sometimes have his chin in the air and Inoue. To speak about Doheny as a fighter, like I said, he's used to being the underdog, and so I think experience-wise that offers a lot, and that's something in which Inoue won't have, of course, because Inoue is always used to being the favourite, used to having all the eyes on him and things like that. But Doheny comes into fights possibly even knowing that he's not really going to win the fight, but just there to really make a good account of himself. And it's just a different type of mindset, I'd imagine, to that of just somebody who is so comfortable being the favourite. He's patient a lot of the time. I think he does pick his shots relatively well, and he has good feints, good power. He comes in at good times and kind of forces his way in and really tries to force you into the back foot when he does come forward. He's relatively calculated in his work and, like I say, seems to wait to come in at a good time. He's confident, like I mentioned. I think he can wear you down and or land a big overhand, in which he does often do with nice big overhands in which he sets up relatively well with the jab. He is typically an inside fighter, so if he's going to end up getting inside of Inoue, which you can do, then he might be trading. I don't necessarily know if Inoue is going to want the fight to be on the inside too much. He uses physicality, and so if he can possibly tie Inoue up and make it a little bit of a messy fight like he did in that last fight versus Biogos, that's where he could find bits of success. He's got solid bodywork. He gives his all in fights, and like I say, is going to be a tough opposition for Inoue. Negatives about him, I think he has sometimes a bit of a low output when he's taking a little bit too long, a little bit too patient with his work, and perhaps that might result in hesitancy against Inoue, which is something which Inoue causes a lot of his opponents to have, that hesitancy. He's the less technical out of the two, and then can cross his feet over and be quite a big target in front of you. He's slower, less accurate, rushes in. Like I say, he's typically got relatively good timing when he does come in, but he is kind of just forcing his way in, like I say, rushing in a bit. And then Inoue, with them excellent counters in which he has, might be able to see that coming. I think he has his head on the line. He's can come in and out on straight lines. He's been hurt in fights. He can be a bit predictable. Sometimes he'll just kind of force that jab in your face, not really pull it out, and then just go with the overhand and then just do that over and over again. And Inoue is very good at, like I say, spotting trends and seeing and working out fighters, and he could definitely work that out. He sometimes just has his fights being a bit messy, and Inoue's, I think, somebody's going to be able to make a fight a bit clean or be able to work out exchanges and make the better out of exchanges, even if they are messy. He doesn't really have much defensive movement, and I think he's been hurt to the body. And like I say, Inoue has excellent body work. Inoue is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Inoue will win via TKO in round 5. I think it's going to be, like I say, there's tough opposition there in Doheny, but I think it's going to be relatively comfortable work. I think this is a fight in which hopefully he will come and shine. Hopefully he will show improvements and perhaps a little bit more discipline from that last fight, and show that knockdown he has learned from that, like he learned from that Doheny fight, and really shown that he's developing as a fighter still. And yeah, I think it's going to be a comfortable performance. I think he can counter him if he rushes in. I think he can pick him apart to the body if he doesn't rush in. I think there's not really many things Doheny can do to be able to really find too much success, and we'll have to wait and see if it goes into the later rounds possibly, but I just don't see it going into the later rounds. Then who we could go on to fight? I mean, it seems like he wants to have one more fight this year perhaps, in the super bantamweight division before he then tries to move up into the featherweight division in 2025. I put Liao as an option of who he could fight, but possibly that might be the fight after, depending on if Liao's even still champion. It seems like the featherweight champions are kind of swapping around a bit at the moment, and of course Liao's just become IBF champion from that Lopez fight. But other fighters in the super bantamweight division, like I mentioned, Goodman, Kazmierov, Akhmadaliev, they're pretty much the three. If I'm ranking them from 1 to 3 of who I'd want to see the most, probably Akhmadaliev, because of the style in which he possesses, I think would be entertaining, would be maybe a little bit something different to that of what Inoue's faced. Goodman and then Kazmierov. I think Kazmierov could be easily. Goodman will come with that will to win because he's an unbeaten fighter, but perhaps has a bit of a style which Inoue might be used to facing. And like I say, in general, it's going to be interesting to see which super bantamweight he picks next. But he has pretty much free reign to do whatever he wants, to be honest. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy it. Like the video if you need, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.